You go wheels.
Cool. I'm going to keep the introductory remarks blessedly short. So our presentation tonight is from Christian Allen, Expanding Your Horizons, Emerging Opportunities for Game Devs. So let me begin with a quick introduction. I'm Larry Cooperman. I'm the vice chair of the board of this chapter. I play Batman. I play a Robin to Grover's Batman over there. Grover is our chair. Also here is Emily, Dustin, and she might show up later, but Morgan. If you are not already members of the IGDA, please consider seeing one of us on the board, and we can tell you why you should join up. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors, Kevin and Tina from Next Gen Video Game Cafe, who provided the pizza for us. So please like and follow them on Facebook to show your support. A little over a year ago, on September 20th, 2018, we relaunched this chapter. As is always the case when you start off a new endeavor, we weren't sure that anybody was going to show up. We are now among the fastest growing chapters of the IGDA, and we have over 400 members and are growing strong. So that's a positive thing from the past. It would be remiss of me if I did not mention that 2 years ago today, our community lost 58 members in an act of senseless violence. The shooting took place 2 years ago. And while those lives will never be recovered, our community continues to go strong, and we're doing our best to overcome all of that. And I'd like to think that in some ways, this IGDA, as a group supporting game development in this area, is part of the Vegas Strong tradition. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the stage over to Christian, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. I'm just going to rewind this one bit here. Put this down here. Good evening, everybody. How's it going? Good. Yay. Thanks for everybody for coming. See some familiar faces. I was here last January. It's warmer now in October, so I like that a lot better. So I think maybe I'll swap my Phoenix and Vegas visits for next year, because I went to Vegas in August and it was very hot. Thanks for having me. I chatted with Grover a little bit last week about what kind of content we're going to look at tonight, and we talked about some different opportunities for game developers, both from Epic Games and just looking at broader opportunities both for individual developers and for folks that are working in the indie game space, or possibly looking at running a game development company at some of the expanding things. This isn't going to be a super polished one, but I'll kind of run through it. Probably take me about 45 minutes and an hour, and then I'm happy to take any questions after that. So this is me. I'm Christian Allen, Unreal Evangelist for North America. That's my Twitter, @Cerelan. If you take some pictures of me and tweet them at me, @Cerelan, then the person whose picture I like the most, I will send you a swag package. I'm kind of low on swag right now. There's plenty of stickers and pins in the back. Please grab some of those. Please don't be the one person who shovels them all into like your shirt and carries them out. But if you want to do that, that would be great, and I'll get a swag package in the mail. Believe it or not, I do these all over the country all the time, and I generally have no proof that I've done it until the YouTube video comes out. So that'll let my bosses know that I wasn't lying, that I'm actually in Vegas working, not just in Vegas. Also, LinkedIn, Christian Allen Designer. That's my thing on LinkedIn. Facebook, I'm just going to ignore you because you don't need to see pictures of my kids. Also, I have cards back there, and I have extra cards for my email. But LinkedIn is a great way to get in touch with me. You message me, I check it every couple days. Twitter's great for, well, Twitter's not great, but Twitter's Twitter. Messages there I don't check quite as much, so LinkedIn is generally the best way to get a hold of me. But I am the Unreal Evangelist for North America, so generally what I do is I spend about 30% of my time explaining what an Unreal Evangelist does, especially to people at Epic that are like, who are you, and what do you do, and how did you get that shirt? But generally what I do, I kind of have twofold. First off, a little bit about my background. I am a game designer. It will be the big 2-0 for me this year. I started making mods for Rainbow Six in the late 90s. Got a job at Red Storm Entertainment as an assistant designer. Got hired to work on Rainbow Six on the PC. Did that for a few months on Athena Sword, and then immediately got moved over to Ghost Recon on the Xbox, because that's what happens when you go into AAA games. Worked my way up to creative director through Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter was my last major title. I was also in, I did do some work on Ghost Recon Future Soldier. And fun anecdote about that, if you start up Future Soldier, the opening cinematic has this story about these 3 ghosts that go off and get killed. And those 3 ghosts are named Haynes, McGann, and Allen, because Mike Haynes, Jeff McGann, and myself were all leads that left during development of that game, so they killed us. So I got killed in Ghost Recon. Then I went to Bungie for a few years on Halo Reach, went on to Warner Brothers, where I worked pre-production on Mad Max and what became Shadows of Mordor, and then I founded my own game studio called Cerealin LLC. Shipped a game called Takedown on PC and Xbox, Epsilon, and in Unreal 4 on PC. Also did a virtual reality game called Hotel Blind, which is the first virtual reality game to simulate being a blind person. And also the first Unreal Engine in virtual reality running at a steady 120 frames per second. So I also did had my big break into Hollywood, where I worked on After Earth, the mobile game. I worked actually for Will Smith's production company, Overbrook Entertainment, representing the game IP. And as we know, After Earth was released. It's a huge science fiction franchise, books, movies, TV show. Oh wait, no, it failed horribly. That was my big break into Hollywood, so I'm not in Hollywood. And after a while running my own studio and doing consulting, my wife finally said I had to get a job again. So now I'm at Epic. So my public-facing side is doing things like this. I go around the country, I talk to people using Unreal Engine, tell everybody how awesome Unreal is. And then on the more private side, my main focus is on indie game developers. So I do focus on North America, so indie game developers in Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Help them pass on all my wisdom learned from both success and failure, and hopefully help them make better games. And then I also do demonstration projects. This is a game called Parachess that I'm working on. This is actually, I think I presented here last year, that I built completely in blueprints using Unreal Marketplace content. So if you're interested in that, I can talk about that a little bit more later. But looks pretty hot, huh? All free assets. So what am I talking about tonight? So first off, I want to get a little bit into convergence. And this is more about talking about different opportunities using 3D technology. So the subjects that I'm going to talk about here really apply to all kind of 3D game engines, whether you're using Unreal, Unity, Game Maker, probably not so much Twine, but pretty much if you're using 3D technology, these are the kinds of things or would apply to you. And the term convergence, I first came into it when I was working for Ubisoft in the early 2000s. And at the time, that Ubisoft used the term, Yves Guillemot used the term a lot to talk about what he felt was going to be the convergence between Hollywood and video games. And what they were trying to get across at the time was that in the future, i.e. now, that there wouldn't be separate video game and movie IPs. That intellectual property would just be created, and there would be books, and there would be movies, and there would be video games. And considering how well that turned out in the last 15 years with all of the great video game movies that have come out since then, I thought maybe we could repurpose that term to something else. When I think about it now, as an Unreal evangelist, I am kind of a public face of Epic, and people reach out to me on LinkedIn through meetings like this, and I talk to a lot of different folks working in both game development and enterprise, and I'm seeing more and more what is a new convergence, and what that convergence is really 3D technology coming into singular packages that can be used for multimedia production across lots of different industries. And so the same skill set that a fourth year animation student or third year animation student might have is going to be the same skill set that they're going to need to make games. They're going to do production for medical pre-visualization and virtual reality. The same skill set that a level designer is going to use in a AAA game like Gears of War might be something that they can apply to things like architecture. So I really wanted to kind of talk about those opportunities, especially in the indie game space. We all know that, you know, when you're struggling to either get a job in AAA game industry, you're trying to get a job at a game studio, or you're working on your own indie game that you're going to ship on Steam or the Epic Games Store, revenue and money is something that you're always probably thinking about. So whether that's working towards a AAA career and you're looking to build your portfolio, or if you're looking to work as an indie dev and look at supplemental things that you can work to expand your revenue potential while still building the same skill set, even if your goal is to continue to make games. So with that, I'll kind of talk through kind of the high level of these different opportunities and how they've grown, and then I'll talk about some funding opportunities from Epic specifically. First off is the simulation world. The simulation world has always been something that runs alongside games. It's probably the most, I guess, kind of boring subject when it comes to using 3D technology. But what's been interesting in the simulation world in the last 10 years specifically is simulation, and specifically regarding government simulation and military simulation, traditionally in the past would use proprietary software solutions. Whether that was because of security reasons or because they were trying to do something that just didn't work with the game engine, like something, you know, a military simulation that's simulating thousands of units, or a plane simulation that has to have very specific data sets. They usually used proprietary technology. These days, that's changing. The simulation world is really opening up. We're seeing a lot of simulation opportunities, both in the traditional military and government standpoint, but also with things like oil and gas, safety simulation, training, things like that. There's a lot of new opportunities. So that's something that, while traditionally, you know, simulation used to be thought of something like big, clunky, and ugly, now they realize that using modern technology to actually make something that has a good user interface, user experience, looks good, feels good. I don't want to say plays good because simulation is something that can be really taken advantage of. Next is a big one is architecture and interior design. We're seeing a huge influx of this at Epic in Unreal specifically, of architecture and interior design folks coming over using game technology. And I think this is a huge opportunity for environment artists that might have traditionally worked in games and are looking at either, again, additional income or possibly a different career. The architecture world is realizing the power of real-time rendering, and especially as things like real-time 3D ray tracing comes online, of what they can present and perform, present to their customers, really makes a big difference. You know, it used to be that, again, thinking about, you know, architectural technology, you think about CAD, you think about super details, giant files that take forever to open, take forever to make changes. You know, I was talking to a enterprise customer a few months ago, and they do stadium renders for ticket sale agencies. And the way that they were doing it is they had this max file where they would build a stadium, so like a 20,000 seat stadium. They'd build it all manually. They'd place everything, place all the seats, and then they would, I think they had a macro that would go through and basically use V-Ray to render 3 views from each seat so that the user could go onto the website, click on a seat, and see what views they would have. And that worked fine for doing it once. But what they were running into is that their clients were coming back to them and saying, okay, that's great. We really like this, but we just switched out a vendor, and now we need to get rid of all the Doritos signs and put in Mountain Dew signs. So if you could just open up that max file, change it, render every single seat that has a view to that sign, that would be great. And they were doing that manually. So they were going in and they were guessing which seats actually could see that sign and rendering everything. And I was like, I could set up a blueprint in an hour that could go in, replace that object, cast to it, detect which seats needed to be re-rendered, and then you could re-render that in Unreal. So there's a lot of business applications. And again, as a developer, if you're looking to build your portfolio, architecture is something that you can really explore and really show off the skill set that you have to build a really beautiful rendered environment. So there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that's going to be something that's growing. And there's a huge set of folks that have really good architectural skills that don't necessarily have really good 3D rendering skills. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there in the future to have folks that have game industry experience to be able to teach those architectural folks what are some of the possibilities. I was in a training session where one of our Unreal trainers was giving a class to a bunch of Unreal folks, and it took him about half an hour to get the architecture folks on board with what a streaming level is and what streaming a level in and out means and what that could do to real time. And once they showed them, it was literally like they had a wall like this, and they're like, now let's take these windows out and see what happens. Click, and then all the windows disappear. Now let's look at the view. And the architecture people were like, oh, that's so amazing. And all the game people were like, So a lot of opportunity there. Next is in film and TV. I know this is, if you're trying to get into AAA game development, telling someone that, if you're having a hard time in AAA game development, you should just get into film and TV. That's, real easy. So it just as inaccessible as before, but again, I think what we're seeing change is, again, real time. So you've got the integration of 3D technology in the lower left. The movie is called, does anybody recognize it? I forget the name off the top of my head. Marwin? Someone will look it up. It was a movie, I think it was Steve Carell, where he had an imagined world of dolls. And all of the facial rig capture for the different actors on the different dolls was all done in Unreal, and all the rendering was Marwin. So that's an example of kind of old school, just traditional rendering. In the upper right, we've got Jon Favreau, and what he has switched over to through some of his trepidations in Lion King, moving into The Mandalorian, is using real-time 3D production. So in the, again, olden days, a movie producer or movie director, they set it up, they got the actors in the scene, it's all green screen. They've got some concept art of what it's going to look like. Okay, that's the skyline. The dragon's going to come in from here. They've got a guy with a tennis ball on the end of a pole, and they go, okay, that's the dragon. Look at that. Actors do their thing, and then it goes into post. 6 months later, the director gets to see what it looks like and goes, oh man, that wasn't the right shot. Should we go back and reshoot it? With virtual production, in real time, they can look at the scene, they can see the dragon, they can see the skyline, and the director can say, you know what, let's go ahead and move the sun over 30 degrees to the right. Now let's check the lighting. Those kinds of things. So we just did a virtual production that actually combined Unreal Engine with real-time virtual production, LED walls, and a set that actually I think I have in here later, where all those things are combining into one thing. And again, that skill set, that real-time skill set, is going to be something that's going to be valuable to Hollywood moving forward. And when I say Hollywood, I mean all film and TV production. And there's a few other examples later on. Product design. Here we have the McLaren configurator that was built in Unreal, and this alt-space car demonstrator. What product developers are realizing that, traditionally, again, they create high-resolution 3D models of all their content, but now, after they finish the production process, they can use those same 3D models to expose that content to consumers. And of course, those things need to be performant. They can't just be super high-resolution models, because something like a car configurator demo has to be able to run on an iPad. So when you walk into a car dealership to buy your McLaren, I know when I go buy my McLarens, I always want to be able to customize them. I have like 3 or 4 of them. Those things have to be performant. So again, that's game development skills it's applying to a traditional industry. Medical. Medical is super cool. and is definitely expanding. Has some of the same kind of history as the kind of government simulation. I think medical with VR training. There's a lot going on in the research world where people are doing right now, and they have been for a couple years, doing a lot of studies on virtual training versus real training. So, what are the cost benefit analysis of doing whatever is in this right image, which I assume is putting a battery into this person's shoulder blade for some reason. Of what are the wins for training a surgeon or a dental hygienist or whoever with virtual reality. So there's a lot of room to expand there, and then also in just broader, more deep medical technology on the left, we have a demonstration of a brain clot simulation that was made by virtual brain aneurysm clipping surgery. By a company in Japan. And so what this is that a doctor can take a set of data from diagnostics on a patient, plug it into the system, and then it can predict what problem is going on in the brain, and then the surgeon can test out the different solutions. So, there's a blockage on this blood vessel. We put doctory stuff in that, and then it fixes the brain. Yay! So kind of complicated, above my pay grade, but again, a lot of opportunity again in both medical simulation and medical research world, and I'll touch on a little bit some of the other opportunities for that. Real-time VFX. This is an extension of what I talked about with virtual production. Real-time VFX, most notably for us, has probably been the Weather Channel. Probably a lot of you saw the Weather Channel stuff this year. They've gone kind of full-blown where they've got their on-site set, and then it was made famous during one of the hurricanes where the anchor stood up and she was presenting, and then the studio started flooding, and then poles started flying down and winds started blowing. And they combined this real-time interactive set with real-time VFX. And that's done live. And really that's an expansion of some of the technology that was developed in sportscasting. So the ability to, in football, put lines on the grass for football stuff. Sorry, I'm not a sports person. Take that football stuff and now apply it to weather stuff, and it's exciting. But there's a lot going on in the real-time VFX world, and a lot of things like television broadcasting, whether it be local journalists, local productions, TV casting, things like that. They all need that same talent set of game developers. Therapeutic and research. So this is something that gets me really excited. On the therapeutic side, there's a lot going on, again, across all technologies, where people are doing a lot of research when it comes to things like traumatic brain injury, pediatric therapeutics with things like autism and stuff like that, where people have realized that, for example, a child on the spectrum that's coming in for therapy, there are programs that people are working both on mobile and in virtual reality where it can be good to take that child and give them a therapeutic game to play for 20 minutes before they go into therapy. So it helps get their brain set in the right moment, things like that. TBI is a lot of the same things, like doing repetitive motion in a fun way. But even when it comes to things like just manual injury, I work with a group called Operation Supply Drop, which supports disabled veterans, and they have vets that come in that might have a back injury that just need to sit on a medicine ball for 3 hours twice a week. Well, you can imagine sitting on a medicine ball, probably in the VA, watching C-SPAN is probably really boring, but if you can hand them a game where they can play a game for 3 hours while they're sitting on a medicine ball, that can be really beneficial. Now, if you take that and actually apply it to therapeutic uses where maybe you're getting some data from the user on what they're actually doing, there's a lot of different room in the therapeutic world. And then on the research world, the same kind of thing. People are realizing that game engines are extremely powerful. The technology that goes into a physics simulation in Unreal or Unity can be applied to other things. So the example here is from C4X Discovery, which is using Unreal to do visualizations of new drug development, where they plug data in and it spits out molecules and stuff like, again, over my head, but a lot of opportunities. So therapeutic and research, again, if your skill set includes Unreal or Unity, and you're skilled in blueprints, and you know how the systems work, when these companies reach out for talent, those are opportunities that you can look into. So, with all those opportunities, here comes the epic part. So, epic mega grants. Who likes money? All right, I like money too. I should apply for an epic mega grant. Epic Mega Grants is a program that we launched in April. We launched it at GDC. And we had a previous grant program, which was a $5 million program that had been open for the past few years. And that finished up in January. And with the success of Fortnite, we were able to open up a Mega Grants program. And the Mega Grants program is a $100 million fund. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be giving all $100 million out at once. We're going to be spacing that out. But it is a grant program specifically for people either using Unreal Engine or benefiting the 3D community in general. And I'll talk a little bit about what those specific things are going to be. You're going to see some crossover between the Mega Grants categories and what I just talked about. And that's kind of on purpose to maybe get the brain kicking on some opportunities for yourself. So the Mega Grants Fund, the grants are on a submission basis, and they're generally designed to be given out in $5,000 to $500,000 grants. So they're not intended to be full development budgets for a project. If you have a $10 million project, we're generally not going to approve that for Mega Grants. I have to say generally, because it was a really hard and fast rule, and then Tim Sweeney decided to give $1.2 million to Blender, which kind of broke that rule, but he's Tim Sweeney. He can do whatever he wants. So, but generally, $500,000 is the cap. They are grants. They are not publishing agreements. They are not loans, and they are not an investment. So they are completely separate from everything else. It is a grant that Epic gives to developers to make cool stuff. And all intellectual property rights are maintained by the owner. So whether you have a game or a piece of software or 3D publishing, whatever you have, you retain all those rights. So what kind of projects are eligible? Pretty much mostly what I just covered, but the specific categories are games. First off, all sizes, all platforms. Unreal Engine, if you're already in the engine, but we also opened it up to projects that want to transition to Unreal. So if you already have a project that's built in another game engine and you're interested in moving to Unreal, you can apply for a grant specifically for funds to cover your team training up, getting your assets moved over, anything like that. But we do want them to be at or beyond the prototype stage. So I'll give a link to the submission form. When it comes to games, we've had thousands of submissions since March. And so if you can imagine those thousands of submissions, and those are just the ones that are in prototype stage, we're not in the capacity where we're going to be able to, look at your PowerPoint presentation and go, yeah, that looks awesome. Here's $50,000. We want it to be in prototype or beyond. Media and entertainment. So that can be individuals or organizations. One of the things that I like to talk about when it comes to individuals and organizations on media and entertainment, this really means a TV show, a web series, basically anything that you want to produce using Unreal. And it can also be tagged along. You're not cut out if you've received a local grant. So I'm not sure if they do it in Las Vegas or in Nevada, but a lot of states will have grants or tax breaks that you can get for TV and movies. Canada obviously has a lot of different funds. So if you receive one of those, you're still eligible for a fund, and actually that probably bumps you up a little bit on the list because someone else has already reviewed your submission before it comes to us. But we have individuals doing it. We have large organizations. If you're too large, probably, is there any Disney folks in here? No? Okay, you guys probably aren't eligible. but anybody smaller than Disney, you can go ahead and apply. Like I said, film, television, live events, LBE, which is location-based entertainment. So if you're doing like a live show, we've got some projects that combine Unreal with either AR with live shows or screen technology, things like that. If you're interested in putting something like that on, feel free to apply. Enterprise. I talked a little bit about this already. Visualization, simulation, interactive. This example here is Virtueasy Dental. All these examples, by the way, on these slides, Infinitesimals, Meta Runner, and now Virtueasy Dental. These are all projects that have received Unreal grants. This one is a training simulation for dental hygienists to be able to go in and do training on virtual mouths before they get into real people's mouths, which I think is a great idea. Architecture, automotive, manufacturing, medical, product design, basically anything that's not a game is what we kind of class as enterprise, but also non-traditional applications. So some of the applications I've seen, one of the things that I thought was really cool was I was down in Houston doing a presentation like this, and there was a company that made safety shutdown panels for oil rigs. So the actual panels that would be on the oil rigs that if something went wrong, you'd go over and break the glass and pull the thing. And the problem is that to get people qualified on those, they had to shut down the rig so that people could go like once every 6 months and do their certification. And they were investigating doing a virtual reality simulation so that people could get qualified off the rig. Now, of course, again, when it comes into government and simulation, there's all sorts of regulations on how that's applied. But the actual development of something like that, if you've made a UI or a UX, or if you worked on a virtual reality game, that probably sounds pretty simple to you. Actually just setting up a simulation of someone, poking a panel seems pretty straightforward. So if you've got skills in game development, that's something you can definitely look at. Education. Hopefully that's something that's of interest to folks here. If you're looking to do research or curriculum development using Unreal, or implementing Unreal into classrooms and programs. This example here was some research papers for developing business game for interactive architectural visualization and the role of serious gaming using virtual reality applications for 3D architectural visualization. Sounds pretty cool. It's some papers that some smart folks are going to be presenting at a conference in Vienna, and they received a developer grant to do that research. So if you're in education, we recognize that training folks in the technology of tomorrow is what we need to do more of. We're doing active outreach in education. We have traditionally done that, but we're pushing even harder than we have been, both into primary and hopefully secondary education. And that's something that we're really excited about supporting. Tools and open source. So I said anything that really helps the 3D community, we want to support. And Blender is the easiest example of that. So Blender provides an open source 3D development tool that can be used by indies, can be used by students, can be used by anybody. And we really like that. So we awarded Blender a $1.2 million grant. The tools in open source, we do require that they be integrated into Unreal, or that they just help the community in general. So if that's something that is a plug-in tool for, to cross things between Max and Maya and Unreal and Unity, all those can be considered. So if you've got some really cool whiz-bang idea for something that's going to make the 3D development community just better and more efficient, definitely reach out to us on that. So if you have something that's awesome that I didn't mention, you should just go ahead and apply. The great thing about the Epic Mega Grants is it's run by Epic, which is a private organization. We're not a government. We don't have to have a bunch of complicated things. When the submissions come in, they're broken up by verticals, and they're reviewed by people that work in that industry. So if you come up with a cool architectural visualization project and you submit it, that's going to go over to our enterprise team, and then it's going to go to the architectural visualization team. If you submit a game, it's going to come to the game team. If it's just cool technology, like this is a dev grant that was given to a developer in Japan that was just giving YouTube lectures on using ray tracing. So he or she developed a bunch of YouTube tutorials on using ray tracing, applied for a developer grant, and received a developer grant to continue creating those tutorials. So if it doesn't fit with any of those things that you thought before, or that I mentioned before, but it sounds really cool, we definitely encourage you to go ahead and submit. There's no negative to submitting. So if you submit, whether your game is just at prototype and you submit and you're denied, and then a year later you've continued to work on your game and you want to submit again, you can go ahead and do that. I don't recommend that you submit like every 2 weeks. That's probably going to get you blacklisted. But there's no kind of like hard and fast. It's especially with indie devs a lot. I talk to indie devs and I'm like, your game's ready, get it in. They're like, well, it's not quite perfect. I'm like, we know, we're game developers. We can see what you're going for. So go ahead and submit. So how do you submit? Well, there's a form online. It's at unrealengine.com/megagrants, and you fill out that form and you click submit. What I recommend for games and any kind of visualization project, I recommend that you have a prototype. There's a build submission that you can upload your build with that. And the other thing I do highly recommend, especially for games, is that you make a video. You don't have to. You can write it all out in text. But one of the key aspects that we look at when it comes to mega grants, and I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, but we look at the developer story. So you can imagine 2 different projects. So let's imagine a mobile game project that is a super cool RTS on mobile, and it's going to revitalize. It's going to be the most awesome RTS ever on mobile. There's 2 developer stories that could go along with that. One, there's 5 friends that all went to school together, and then they graduated, and then they started working on their pet project, and they came up with this awesome idea for an RTS. That's one developer story. Another developer story is Facebook thought this would be a good idea and funded $40 million to put 100 developers on it for 6 months. One's probably going to get a dev grant, the other one's probably not. Nothing against Facebook, but that's not a really exciting developer story of like, hey, Facebook made this app and we thought it was really cool, so we gave them $50,000. One, Facebook wouldn't care, and 2, nobody would think that was pretty awesome. So the developer story is important, and that's part of your submission. We really want to hear about you as a developer, and hear that content. So I recommend making a video to go along with it. Tell us about yourself. Again, nothing that you submit is going to be made public. Unless you make it public. We don't take submissions and like post them on our website. So really, you're submitting to people that are in the industry that you're submitting for, and that's who the audience is. Kickstarter videos are a good thing to use as examples, but it doesn't have to be, this super clean cut, hyper edited. Spend 6 months really polishing it up. Just tell us about yourself. We want to know who you are and what you're doing. Couple guidelines. If you do submit you don't have to request a specific amount, but I recommend it. It's helpful. Sometimes projects don't submit an amount, and we just kind of guess what we think they would want. If you submit for over $25,000, then you need to have a plan for the funds. If it's under $25,000, you don't need to get into details. If it's over $25,000, we request that you have a plan for what the funds are going to be spent on. Now we know development and funding and startups and all these things change plans. So again, we're not a publisher, but in general, if your plan is, hey, I'm 19 and I have this cool idea and I'm going to take $150,000 and go to Costa Rica and make it, then we might be a little but if it's like, hey, we're going to hire X number of people for X amount of months, and that's what we're going to spend the funds on, or we're going to buy X amount of hardware, or we're going to do a marketing plan, whatever you want to do with it, just let us know. And like I mentioned, build and video, highly recommended. The build is probably more so for games. If you've got a concept, or a prototype, specifically, especially if it's built in another technology for, some kind of therapeutic software, or, obviously something like an LBE, location, a live event using AR, you know, you don't need to submit all your technology that you built behind the scenes for that. But highly recommended for games. So the criteria, the biggest thing is complete and documented submission. So there's like, it's not real long. I mean, it's maybe 2 pages worth of information that you need to fill out, but you really should fill out all that information. We actually had to hire a coordinator whose role is a good chunk of their role is to just get rid of the trash. If people are like, hey, can I have some money? Or, hey, can you pull the robots out of Fortnite? There's a lot of those. But complete and documented submissions, so fill the whole thing out. Project viability and scope is one of the key review criteria. So, you know, if you think about a game project where you're like, hey, I'm at vertical slice, I've built my 1 level, and I'm going to build 12 more levels. It's going to take this amount of time. Boom, boom, boom. Here's exactly what I'm going to do. And I would like $75,000 that will help me get to alpha that I can take and shop to publishers, or help me build a demo for Kickstarter, or whatever you're doing. Having that viability and scope in there is really important, because if it is just like, we'd like some money that would help and we don't really know where we're going, but money would be great, that's going to be a lot harder for us. So we want to know that the grants are going to help the project move forward, because that's the whole point. Be specific about your Unreal Engine integration or lack thereof. If it is something where you're looking to move a project over from another technology, just again be specific on that. Hey, I need to train my people for this amount of time. It's going to take me this amount of work to get all my assets moved over. And again, if it's using another technology, or especially if it's something building for the broader community, we want to be real specific on that, what technology you're building. And if there is a broader benefit to the developer community, if it's building, if you want a grant to build an environment art set, say you're into 3D, or what is it, Megascans, you're really into Megascans, and you want to get a grant to buy a super high-res camera because you want to build assets for the Unreal Marketplace and the Unity store, cool. What's the benefit to the community? What's going to be the win there? Maybe you've got some technology for Megascans that allows it to go into Blender really easy. I'm just making stuff up now, but be specific about it. Wow, I went through that really, really fast, didn't I? I did. Sorry. I thought that would take me way longer. So, yeah, I went a lot faster than I thought. But with that, I guess the best way would just be open it up for questions. Oh, wait for the mic, just because they're recording it for the stream.
Hello. How long is the review process, and do you provide any feedback on the games?
That is a great question. So the review process is aimed to be at 90 days. So within 90 days, you should get an answer. Now, we announced that when we announced this program at GDC, and we got a little overwhelmed. I think we had 4,000 submissions that week. So we haven't quite made the 90-day mark yet, but we're getting there. We're getting the process down. Everybody that submitted since then has at least gotten a hey, we need more time letter. So we've at least got that process. In the old grant program, you either got a yes or you never heard anything. So now our goal is to get it into 90 days. We understand, especially myself, I understand, having run an indie game studio, a lot of times a no early on is better than a maybe for 6 months, right? I understand how when you're trying to put deals together and you're talking to multiple people, having this thing open that could possibly come through, a lot of times the earlier that you can find out, the better. So we're pushing that forward. We've got a lot of folks involved. And if you noticed, you may have noticed that, up until March, we were doing kind of regular, like every 3 months, we'd be like, hey, these folks got grants. And we'd have like a list of like 15 of them. And since then, because we've been so overwhelmed, we're actually just giving out the grants and letting the actual developers announce. Instead of like waiting to get it all into one and doing one big announce. We'll probably get back to that kind of cadence But like Blender and a few of the examples I used here, all the examples I used in that mega grants are ones that they self-announced. Basically, we notified them they got the grant. They went on social media and went, "We got a grant," and then we went, "Awesome." So that's the goal, is 90 days. But again, one of the key things is you can resubmit even if you get a no. Now, to your question as far as feedback, we tend not to give specific feedback on why you got a yes or a no. Well, actually, if you get a yes, you'll probably get plenty of feedback. If you get a no, we're not going to be able to give specific feedback, and there's legal reasons for that, and then there's also just bandwidth. Again, with the amount of content that we review, we're unable to do that. Now, if you have a smaller project that you want to submit for a grant, I'm always happy to talk to folks about it. I do this actually quite often. I'll jump on the phone and just kind of go through what I already just went through with folks, and I'll give general kind of feedback and advice. I don't review projects before they go in to submission, because one, I don't want to say like, "Oh, you totally need to include this. This is really important." And then they spend a lot of time doing that, and then they submit, and then they don't get approved, and then Christian told me I wasted all this time. And two, I don't want to be like, "Oh yeah, this will totally get approved," because it is, way above my pay grade on what it gets approved. And you do have to remember too, while this is a grant program, there obviously is competition. Things are just by 1,000 people submitting their projects. When people are looking at the different projects or the different categories, they're comparing them to each other. Does that answer your question? Who's brave enough for the next question? Before we've got to get rolling on the Q&A here. There's no other questions. How about some general Unreal Engine questions? How about licensing? I can talk about licensing. Who knows how much it costs to ship an Unreal Engine game? Nothing, correct. Yes, so while I'm up here, I'll just talk about Unreal Engine licensing for a few minutes. So just so you know, to ship a game in Unreal Engine, you can go download it for free. You just go to unrealengine.com, register, download it for free. Once you download it, you're agreeing to the EULA agreements, the end user license agreement. At that point, you are a EULA licensee. You can use the software in perpetuity. You have access to all the source code. There's no levels. It's just you got the game. You got access to all platforms, except for proprietary platforms. So for proprietary platforms like the Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, you need to apply to those platform holders. It's all automated now. Once you get approved by them, it sends a message to us. We unlock the source code for their consoles. Goes to you. Once you ship your product with a EULA license, there's a 5% gross royalty. So once you generate revenue on your product, 5% gross. And when I say gross, that means before any platform takes their cut. So if you sell a game on Steam for $10, you owe 5% royalty on that $10, not after the Steam takes their 30%. If you ship a game on the Epic Game Store, we waive your engine royalty, so your engine royalty becomes zero. And all games on the Epic Game Store and all 3D content sold on the Unreal Marketplace to our developers use the same 88-12 split. So you keep 88%, Epic takes 12. We think that's the future compared to some other models. So things are pretty simple. We do have custom licenses. If you have a ton of money and you want to talk about custom licenses, I am happy to elevate you up to our sales team, and they can talk to you about how big of a check you can write. But for most folks, the 5% gross royalty applies or works. Now, if you are working in enterprise architecture, things that may be more of a B2B business, i.e., if you're making say architectural software that you plan to license out to realtors, where you're not actually selling a product to them, we do have specific seat enterprise licensing that's more of a traditional software license for folks that aren't selling individual products. So that's how licensing works in Unreal. Did you have a question?
I do.
All right.
No, I just like playing the microphone. Can't resist. No, so question pertaining to, since we're talking about the store for a second there, right? What is the status these days in terms of exclusives? Is that something that you guys are still working on, or and what is the process of actually trying to go that route?
Epic Game Store exclusives. I bet I could get myself in a lot of trouble right here. So, in general, the way that we've handled the store since we launched it last year is curation. So all the games that have gone on the Epic Game Store have all been hand curated. They've all been hand picked by our biz dev team, working with the different developers. And the exclusives are all individually negotiated as part of that curation process. So how far that's going to continue and what that looks moving forward, that's above my pay grade. I'll let Tim Sweeney, whatever he said on Twitter last week about it, I'll let that stand. But I think Tim has made the point that to launch a store in today's marketplace, you have to have quality content, and that's what we're going after is quality content. And again, like with the sales split, the 88-12 split, we didn't just come up with that for the store when we launched it in November. We were testing that with our Unreal Marketplace for months before that. And before we rolled that out, we had a traditional 30-70 split on the Unreal Marketplace, and we weren't getting adoption. We had some people that were moving over from other stores that might have been making content for Unity Asset Store, for Turbo Squid or whatever. We weren't getting a lot of folks coming over. When we dropped that down to that 88-12 split, we saw a much bigger adoption. We were able to actually issued checks back because we backdated that for when the store launched. So there was developers that had been selling content on there for years that suddenly got, the difference of those checks. And we saw the impact that we had. And the word that I got, the understanding that I got is a lot of the work that's gone into the store, the marketplace, a lot of these back-end systems for things like payment processing and fraud detection and all the businessy back-end stuff that's not really exciting, a lot of that was done for Fortnite. So taking that work and rolling it over into the store, rolling it over to the marketplace is relatively minimal investment. We basically already paid for it, so now we get to roll it over. Similar to what we're rolling out or planning to do with the Epic Online services. So that's kind of my non-answer to your question. Whatever Tim said on Twitter. All right, one in the back.
I understand. I know that the Unreal Engine is totally free, but, well, besides the royalties and everything like that. But what kind of educational programs does Epic Games what kind of programs does Epic Games have that helps upcoming developers or even advanced developers?
No, that's a great question. So one of the things that we've really realized internationally is there is a huge appetite through all these programs that I talked about tonight. There's a huge appetite for Unreal developers. People understand, especially people outside of the games industry are starting to understand the power of real-time development. And so what we get a lot, especially again from enterprise and especially from internationally, especially from places like Brazil, I hear this a lot from my counterpart in Brazil, where you've got Brazil specifically is a good example because you've got a lot of developers in the mobile space. So that's what Brazil's traditionally been known for, is mobile. And mobile up until recently was known for lower fidelity, I'll say it that way, lower fidelity projects that could be kind of built in any engine. And as we've seen specifically out of South Korea, a big push of AAA mobile, where you're having games and experiences coming out on mobile devices that are using all the same render technology, all the same performance and optimization, same kind of things that we use when we put Fortnite out over mobile. A big demand for those skill sets. And where we've traditionally lacked is in the education space. And so we are making an active push into the education space. The first thing that we launched this year is called Unreal Academy, which I don't actually have a link in here. I have it in one of my other presentations. But if you Google Unreal Learning Resources or Unreal Academy, we have launched a ton of video resources for that. We realized for a while everybody would just, they download Unreal and then they just start watching YouTube tutorials. And at least that's how I got started in Unreal. But those YouTube tutorials are a little out of date. So if you just go on YouTube and start searching Unreal tutorials, they'll be like 3-year-old ones. Same with like Udemy and stuff like that. So we realized that's how people want to consume that content. So we've actually got a whole team that's making video content. And we actually, I believe, either recently launched or recently announced kind of a badging and completion system on our learning portal. So you can go on there, and if you complete, like, for example, there is a course called Unity to Unreal that is really kind of more of like a vocabulary type course of like, oh, in Unity you know it is this, in Unreal it's this, or in Unity this is where the editor is, but in Unreal it's over here. We've got Unreal for Architects, we've got Intro to Game Development, all sorts of different courses that you can take, and now you'll actually be able to get badges that the goal is you'd be able to put that like up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I completed this course. So that's the big initiative that we have rolling forward that's kind of available to everybody right now. And then we're continuing our work to our education group has really expanded. We're doing dev days now around North America. So actually next week we're doing one in Seattle. We're doing a main dev day next week. And then for the first time, we're actually doing an indie dev day the day after. Because I focus on indies, I'm calling it the Indie Dev Day and the Muggle Dev Day. Because I don't like the idea of like a main dev day and then indies. I just like to call AAA developers Muggles. I think that's funny. But that's kind of a test, to see about indies. And actually, it's pretty cool. We're doing an introduction to the Epic ecosystem. We're doing some performance talks, and then I'm going to be moderating a panel that is the Moss team from Polyarc. So Moss PSVR game, Astroneer, which is a really cool proc-gen sci-fi game, and Creature in the Well. So I'm going to have those 3 indie devs, and the idea there is there are 3 indie devs that made really cool games in Unreal with small teams, and they actually shipped. So it's about their lessons shipping, not, it's cool to bring indie devs up and go, hey, doesn't my indie game in development look cool? And we've all gotten our indie games to points where they look cool, and then 80% of them don't ever go past that point. So I really wanted to be able to bring up indie devs that actually ship titles. And I'm going to hit them hard on some good lessons, and then maybe some lessons that don't get shared around too much from indie devs. Does that answer whoever's question that was? Awesome.
So, given all your travels and seeing all sorts of different things, giving talks, where do you see sort of the state of the art is, and can you give one or two examples of some really cool things that you find are people going in a different direction, or something new and unthought of, or something like that?
That's a great question. First off, real-time ray tracing is really exciting for the higher end industry, right? Where it's really shining is, again, in that real-time VFX, real-time production, and seeing what people can produce in a short amount of time. What traditionally would be, okay, what I had the opportunity when I worked for Warner Brothers. One of the cool opportunities that I did is Warner Brothers treats its game creative directors the same as it treats movie directors. So when I worked on Mad Max, I was down in Australia meeting with George Miller and pitching to George Miller. Like, George Miller had to sign off on it before Warner Brothers signed off on it. The first presentation I did on Shadows of Mordor was the very first one was to Peter Jackson's lawyers, for some reason, and the second one was to the Saul Zaentz Company, which is the company that owns the book rights. So they all had to sign off. So I got exposed to all those folks. and I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, talking about movies. Anyway, so, you know, when I was down in New Zealand for Lord of the Rings, I went to Weta, and they showed me the idea that Warner Brothers had at the time, and this is super funny to me, is that they would be able to take movie assets from The Hobbit and just dump them into a game, right? That's what like the execs thought. Like, well, we're making this digital movie, and we got a digital game, so we'll just take all these digital assets and put them in a game, and it'll be awesome. Yeah. And then Weta showed us the shirt that Sully wore in Avatar, because they did a lot of the digital work for Avatar. And so Sully was the human character, and he wore a brown shirt as the Na'vi to show that he was human. That shirt had more triangles and detail and material in it than most AAA games that had ever shipped. And so, and to render scenes with that shirt would take weeks, right? So they storyboard out, you know, classic storyboard it out, build it, get it all to the place they want to be, and then do a final render. Take a few weeks, come back, drop it into the movie, watch it. With real-time production and real-time ray tracing and real-time lighting, you know, that process is just so much faster. Right now, it is limited by hardware. There are, you know, I actually have a few indie games that I'm working with that are using it. Grimstar is one. That's an Unreal indie game that was just showcased on NVIDIA's channel. They have the benefit of being a space combat game, so turning on real-time ray tracing wasn't a huge hit for them, and they're also AAA developers working on an indie game at the side, so they're really good at optimization. I tend to tell indies to hold off a little bit when it comes to, you know, things that require a $1,200 graphics card, because if you're trying to sell your $4 indie game and you're requiring someone to have thousands of dollars worth of graphics hardware, it can be kind of not the best business case. But to me, long term, broad, that's pretty exciting. And then for me, from a development standpoint, or from an indie game development standpoint, the access to the knowledge base, the technology, and the content marketplaces are just completely changing the game. I mean, if I had access to the Unreal Marketplace as it exists now when I was indie, I would still be indie, because I would have been able to continue on my project beyond where I ran out of funds and couldn't pay engineers to do stuff anymore. I could have just bought that content for a few $100s, used my blueprint skills, modified it, and continued to rock and roll. So, you know, the ability to go out and not build rocks, to not build grass, to not build trees, to not build skyboxes, just to get something started, is really big in my mind, because you can go out and you can demonstrate. I'll go back to my sweet Parachess example. You can go out and demonstrate visually. This was built by me in like 20 hours worth of work. I'm a game designer. The game that I built before this was a blind simulation, and the reason I built a blind simulation was because I was writing an article for Gamma Sutra, and I wanted to make a project to back up that article, and it was just me, and I didn't have any artists. And I heard this story on the radio about this blind person, and I thought, oh, blind, no graphics, awesome, I can do that. But now I can go out and download assets like this for free. These are all Paragon assets that we put out, about $17 million worth of assets that are available for free on the Unreal Marketplace. And we also have a thing now where we sponsor 5 packs a month. So we actually just pay the marketplace developer a month's worth of income, and then we give it away for free to everybody. So the ability to go out and prototype your project with this level of content and this level of fidelity, and do your performance and your optimization early on, is huge. Because part of the problem as a game designer is that when you're going into a room with a bunch of executives and trying to get them to visualize what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, that can be extremely difficult. And even the most experienced game executive in the world, you know, they might not know the difference between gray box or real, you know, shipping. You know, you have to be extremely careful. Even big AAA studios, they come in and be like, okay, be We have to be really clear of, what's actual, shipping content, what's gray box. I was giving a presentation. It was at Warner Brothers. I was going to say, I won't say who it is, but it was Batman, which that kind of gives it away. I was giving this presentation, and part of the game was the Batmobile like breaks through a wall and comes down and drives through and blows a bunch of stuff up. And at the time, that was all gray box, so it was all just untextured gray things. And so you've got this checkerboard gray box, and then the Batmobile busts through and then drives around. And one of the executives was like, well, we can't ship a game that's all gray with like checkerboards on it. Like, can we? Like, and we're like, no, the game's 2.5 years out. Like, it wouldn't look like that. We thought you would be able to understand that that's gray box. So the ability for folks to get out and do that content, not need coders to be able to build thing in blueprints or Python or Lua, is super duper powerful, and I'm super jealous of people these days compared to 15 years ago. So it's a great time to be a developer. Yes.
Speaking about performance, since you just brought it up, ray tracing. Two questions. It's a two-part question. First, when do you think the hardware is going to reach a reasonable threshold? Second, when do you think the ray tracing and the capacity to rapidly render in a near real-time or real-time environment is going to become standard?
Well, I hate to make predictions, because I'm usually right. But I mean, the hardware's already coming down. I think if you look at the hardware price, I think we're in a similar place as VR was 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, VR, you had to get the latest and greatest graphics card. It wouldn't work in a laptop, even if it did have a graphics card, because the laptop didn't do its run its HDMI out through the graphics card. So you had to go get a special graphics card, special machine. Vive used 2 USB 2s and a USB 3, and Oculus used 2 USB 3s and a USB 2, so you had to have extra USB ports if you wanted to switch between, blah, blah, blah. And, we've seen VR come so far in such a short amount of time. I think you're going to see that more and more. And the thing to consider with real-time and graphics cards is that big companies are adopting that hardware right now. The folks that are doing product development, they want to be able to pump out, that newly rendered McLaren tomorrow and not have to wait X number of weeks for it to render at a render farm somewhere to get their high resolution model. There's a huge win for them, huge amount of savings, huge amount pushing that hardware adoption on the business side. And I think that's going to drive prices down relatively quickly. And then from there, it's just really, the consumer adoption. How many people want it in laptops? That's going to be, one of the big drivers, right? Because most people that play on PC these days, well, I don't want to say that, don't quote me on that, but a lot of people that play on PC these days want to be able to run it on a laptop. And so, yeah, that's really going to drive adoption. And up until that point, it really is just about planning out your development, right? And so now you've just got, the high end of PC, if you're developing on PC, just got higher. So if you want to support that, you just need to make sure you plan out your project accordingly. Develop for the platforms that you want to use. Know what hardware you're going for, what your marketplace is. And then that was the first part of your question, was on hardware. What was the second part?
The second part was on the performance speed getting close to real time.
Again, that's going to be dependent on the hardware. So, well, it's not only dependent on the hardware. We're getting more efficient. The hardware's getting more efficient. The profiling tools are getting more efficient. Everything eventually just falls under Moore's law, and within X number of months, it's not even going to be a thing we notice. It's not going to be something that we talk about supporting anymore. It's just going to be standard, in my opinion. Does that answer your question? Partially, yeah. I don't have any super secret inline, with NVIDIA or anybody else. So I just go by how I see it advancing, and it's moving really really fast. If you think about, we put out that demo, that Star Wars real-time ray tracing demo, was a whole team at Epic. It was a whole team at LucasArts. It was a whole bunch of people putting that one demo where Captain Phasma walks onto the elevator, and you could rebuild that yourself with off-the-shelf stuff today. Disney would sue the hell out of you, but you could. All right.
Just speaking from the point of view of a game developer, I'll also, an unsolicited commercial message. We're looking at integrating ray tracing into our remake of System Shock, and there was a noticeable level of improvement, of performance improvement, going from 4.22 to 4.23.
Yep.
I mean, it was a day and night improvement there, and you just kind of assume that as people continue to iterate, that it's going to get better.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out the improvements in 4.23, you should check them out. We just released that a couple weeks ago, I think. So it's in 4.23.0, and we should have a hot fix, first fix come out relatively soon on that as well. Sir? Sorry, I wait for the mic.
So got a question as far as Unreal Engine, assets with the launcher and all that. You mentioned that you used the Paragon and all that. I know Epic talked about doing some type of organization for the launcher. Is Epic still planning on that?
So the launch, yes. If it's up to me, yes, definitely. Yeah. So the question is about organization for the launcher. So when we built the launcher and came up with the setup for it, we didn't anticipate. Well, one, we didn't anticipate Fortnite, so that made things a little more complicated. And two, we didn't anticipate the amount of content that people would have. Back before we started giving away free content packs every month, most people had 3, 4, 5 content packs. If you think those are, generally $20 to $80, people would spend a few $100, get some stuff. Then we released all the Paragon stuff for free. That was like 25 packs. Then we started putting 5 packs for free every month. Then we started adding. So now, I don't know if I can. Let's see what. I don't know if my vault will open up here. So, this is mine. That's my content pack. This is almost all of this except for like 4 packs are free packs that I've downloaded off the site. So what we now realize is that we need to do some organization time on this. And we are planning to launch tools to allow people to organize that content better. We just launched a new review and feedback system for the marketplace. That just launched a couple weeks ago, so allow easier to contact the marketplace developers directly, and also to be able to surface reviews, a little bit more robust review system. And so we just rolled that out, and organizational tools for the Vault is something that we're planning on as well. I can't give a date on that, but it is definitely something that we're looking at. And trust me, I'm pushing for it too. Yeah.
Quick shift of gears. Augmented reality.
Yes.
What is the Unreal Engine's ability to create augmented reality experiences? And then second part to that is, where do you think the future is for AR when we get past gimmicks?
So AR is a great question. We first released AR support, I believe, in 4.19. It was actually the very first presentation. I got hired as an Unreal evangelist in September of 2017, and they said, "Okay, you're going to Texas." And I said, "Cool." And then I said, "What should I present?" And they're like, "AR." And I was like, "I don't know how to do anything in AR. I don't even really know what it is." And they're like, "Well, you got a week." So it's actually really interesting from a developer standpoint, because the interesting thing about AR, just from a game design standpoint, is even in VR, in traditional game development and VR, you control the game space, right? When you start a VR game, you're starting that VR game where the game designer decided you should start. Now, maybe you can immediately look around and start doing crazy stuff, but in AR, the world is not what the game developer chose. And we've seen some challenges with that with project, like Magic Leap and HoloLens and some other stuff. It's kind of a hard shift as a game designer to shift around to think that you no longer control the game space. You're now adapting to the player's space and putting your content into that space. We do support ARKit and AR Core on all mobile devices. It's gotten a lot better since 4.19, 4.18, and optimization is really cool. We're continuing to do development stuff. There's lots of quality of life things that come online that don't, because AR is not like the coolest new thing as far as a press release, but there's all sorts of cool development. There's an engineer named Joe Graff out of our Utah office, and he came up with where you can use essentially in AR, and this was a little while ago, but I was impressed by it. Any JPEG can act as a QR code in AR. So you can imagine, taking a picture of a painting in a museum, and that painting itself now acts as a QR code. So you hold your phone up to that painting, the app recognizes that painting because it's a JPEG loaded into it, and then you can actually overlay AR onto that. So you can start to imagine some of the cool things that you could do with AR. As a product, I still think there's a lot of opportunity. I think one of the challenges when you get these kind of big blowout projects like the Pokemon game, that when the next AR projects that come out like that don't make the same splash, people start to immediately assume, oh, it's going down or it's not as exciting. But for me, some of the big wins that I've seen in AR is when it comes to live entertainment. So some of the shows that are going on around the world, Childish Gambino had a show in Australia that we supported where they had their live show. They had the big LED screens synced through Unreal, and all the lighting was done real time by a lighting DJ. But then also the people with the phones that had the app had an AR show going on at exactly the same time. And there's been some pretty cool shows, live shows with AR, and I'm assuming there's some pretty cool stuff going on in Vegas. If there's not, have Vegas call me and we should do some stuff. But I think that's really exciting, and I think when we think about what Magic Leap's doing, what HoloLens is doing, bringing AR onto wearables. And I think that's really exciting. And the thing, again, like with HoloLens, people kind of don't see the development that's been going on with HoloLens. Now HoloLens 2 is coming out, but Microsoft's been pushing that really hard on the enterprise side. They've got doctors and mechanics and all sorts of folks in all sorts of industries that have been using HoloLens for quite a few years. And, we've been supporting it the whole time. Well, don't quote me on the whole time. We now support it. But we're continuing to support both Magic Leap, HoloLens, Android, iOS AR. As far as, I think there's still opportunities. What gets me excited when I start thinking about AR, I get excited about things that can apply to everybody. So I think about that person that's trying to fix their dishwasher, and their dishwasher is full of gross water, and they got one hand in there, and you're trying to watch a YouTube video about how to do it, and you're holding your phone, and you drop your phone into the dishwasher, and it's just miserable. I imagine throwing on a thing of AR glasses, and the Maytag person pops up and is like, hey, I can see your thing. Well, it's obviously you have a problem with this, 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 and this. And you're like, sweet, what do I do? Oh, grab this and pull that and press that. Oh, cool, awesome. That doesn't make cool press, but, when we hit that space, now all of us game developers are making applications that can be used by everyone around the world. And you can imagine what that does to learning. right? Imagine, AR classrooms around the world where, you can go sync in, to anywhere. Like, all of that's really, really exciting to me. Not as splashy as, a big dragon at a show or, people having 15 phones doing Pokemon, but still pretty exciting to me. All right, one more question before we wrap it up. Who's going to be the last? Almost as hard as the first. We good? Okay, well, again, you can reach... Oh, that's not my PowerPoint slide. Let's go back there. Again, you can reach out to me. I'm always available if you're interested in talking about game development, especially indie development. I'm always looking for new games that I can help promote. And I want to say thank you very much to Grover and Larry and the IGDA and Las Vegas. And thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for coming again. This was really great. Thanks. Should just mention that tomorrow night you're going to be at Connor Torres's Unreal workshop, right?
Yes. So, we have Unreal meetups as well. And so Connor Torres is a local educator. He's going to be giving an introduction to Unreal, and then I'll be doing not a super deep dive, but talking a little bit more about Parachess and using blueprints to produce stuff. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'll be tweeting that out tomorrow morning. And I think actually, if you follow Larry, he tweeted about it too. Thank you. Thank you.
Watching the stream. That's how I was monitoring. It was great.